Robin's going to record it right now. And again, so just welcome everybody to Fieldstone4U. Just a little bit about the network. We aim to please. We're here to provide any kind of resources that you need to help you in your leadership journey. And we're excited to offer Fieldstone4U. And this was born out of the pandemic when there were specific issues that needed addressing. And I would quickly go out to our network and ask for resources. And then we have found some out of network resources. So we have had incredible success with our programming since the pandemic began. We always, I think, had fabulous programming, but we have really been more responsive, I feel, in this past year and few months. We are very grateful to Janet Buck at First Republic for being our fiscal sponsor of these wonderful events. So Janet is not only an incredible partner to Fieldstone, but she's an incredible friend to all of us. And so Janet, thank you for being here and for continuing to support all the work that everybody in Orange County is doing in the nonprofit space. I just know that I personally know that I can call Janet with a question and she will always take my call or email. So I'm very, very fortunate. A little bit of housekeeping. If you would mute yourself, that would be great. And then what I do when I listen to a speaker is I put it on speaker mode so that we don't get distracted by looking at everybody else and by looking at ourselves, because that can be exhausting and in my case, overwhelming. So I like to just put it on speaker view so that we can just focus on the speaker. And then if you wouldn't mind going into your name and just putting the organization that you're with so that we know who you're with, and when Jamie can scan the room, she can see what organization you're with as well. So if you can do that, that would be fantastic. So mute yourself first. And then if you could go in and change your name to your organization. If you're not with anybody and you're just listening in, I know one of our board members is on today. Hi, Sophie. So you could just put Sophie, board member, if you want to, but you don't need to do that. This will be an interactive workshop. So if you have questions, you could put them in the chat, and Robin Stropko will be monitoring that, as well as Jamie and myself. So you can put questions in, but if you have a burning question, I'm sure you can raise your hand and Jamie will call on you. I'd like to talk a little bit about this particular topic. This came out of a request from one of our network partners who, I think as we are re-entering the office and what's, it looks a little different than it did a year and a half ago. What does it look like to work with people that can be labeled difficult? And whether that's a board member, Sophie, no problem here, full disclosure. But if you're having an issue with a board member, if you are having an issue with a staff member, if you yourself feel that you're in a really difficult space right now and you're just feeling like you're on edge, what if you have, somebody that comes into the office once in a while, a contractor or a consultant, how can we best work with those people? So we were requested to come up with this topic, and I thought, what, I bet everybody's really going to relate to this. So I immediately went to my go-to person. So I'd like to introduce in a minute Dr. Jamie. She said Dr. J is what she's referred to in the office, who is the Director of Staff Development with Crittenden Services for Children and Families. And Jamie happens to be in our leadership reading group. And so we are in the second year, almost the third year of our reading group, where we read once a month a book that it could be fiction, nonfiction, trade, but we read it through the lens of leadership. And Jamie is always so incredibly insightful. And so one day we talked about Jamie's role at Crittenden and how she heads up all the training. So Jamie has already done a training for Fieldstone, and it was so widely received and favorably received that when this topic came up, I thought, I bet she can speak to this. So I asked Jamie, and in true Fieldstone fashion, Jamie just stepped up and said, absolutely, I will do this, and titled it so clever. I love the title, How to Hug a Porcupine. And so without further ado, I would like to just turn it over to Jamie. And then when Jamie is finished, she will turn it back to me and I'll wrap up and then we'll stop the recording. But I do want to remind you that Robin will put the recording on our YouTube channel so you can access it later and you can share it with your staff as well. So again, thanks to First Republic. Thank you to all of you to continue to support Fieldstone. And just again, another reminder, if there are specific topics that you would like, please reach out to me after this, and I will do my best to find a presenter, and we'll do another similar training. So Dr. J, it's all yours.
All right, can y'all see my screen? Okay, so I have to acknowledge that this is a hedgehog, not a porcupine. The difference between hedgehogs and porcupines, if you want to know, hedgehogs have approximately 5,000 quills. Porcupines have approximately 30,000 quills. Also, I know a lot of random fun facts about porcupines, so you get little trivia tidbits in this fun today. Also, hedgehogs will curl themselves up in a ball to protect their squishy spots, whereas porcupines will erect their quills and run into things. It is a lie that they shoot their quills. They do not shoot their quills. That is just in cartoons. So the one perk we have to start with this is, in order to hug our porcupines or to get hurt by our porcupines, we do have to get kind of in that splash zone, or the strike zone, I guess would be more of an accurate statement. So how to hug a porcupine. There are books out with the same title. I did not realize there were books out with the same title. So, oh, you have a grand hedgehog. Okay, so we were just talking, we may want to have a office hedgehog. So I may have to talk to you later. So anyway, we were thinking about how to title it. So there are books out there. There are books specific for teens and adolescents and young kiddos and everything else. So I have to acknowledge that other people have thought of this, but it has lived on a Post-it on my wall for probably 4 years, specifically talking about dealing with kiddos with trauma, but I think it works with all difficult people. So moving forward, I want you to think about the last time you engaged with a prickly person. I do not want you to, we're not going to share people's names, where they work, who are the prickly people. This is not an outing list. But I want you to think about how it made you feel dealing with the prickly person. And it can be prickly at work, it can be at home, it can be, wherever you dealt with the prickly person. I want you to think about how it made you feel. And then in the chat box, or if you just want to unmute and yell, or politely share your opinion, I want you to tell us how you felt. If you are more of a visual person, you are welcome to scribble your feelings with a pencil or a colored pencil or anything else if you're an art-based person. And you can show that in the video, but I want you to share how dealing with prickly people makes you feel. Frustrated and sometimes angry, absolutely. Under attack. Nervous, sweaty palms, anxious, brings out my judge. Ooh, I love it. Anxious, right? So we're gonna touch on that anxious. And there's a lot of anxiety going on here. Drained, frustrated, lesser, right? So again, we feel kind of attacked and less than. So it's an impact of self-esteem. Frustrated, absolutely. So these are real things. Annoyed, defensive, beautiful, beautiful. So there's a lot of attack words, right? Like, so these are porcupines. They're coming at us. We're going to defend ourselves. Anxious again. So here's what we need to remember: the cost of incivility at work. So when we talk about incivility, this isn't any feel like you put in the middle to referee. Absolutely. So again, now you're between two porcupines potentially. So that's again another defensive thing. Overly cautious. We're going to talk about that. Overly cautious. So if all of this is happening, right? If you're feeling anxious, you're feeling drained, you're feeling on edge, if you're feeling you have to referee, right? It's going to cause some damage to your emotions, right? It's an emotional toll. So thinking about incivility at work, we know from research, this is not just Jamie's brain, this is research, that it impacts our sleep quality. And what do we know about sleep quality? Sleep quality, being tired, driving tired is more dangerous than driving drunk. So this is not a good thing, right? We know that when we don't have enough sleep, our memory is impaired. We want to eat more. All of these things we're frustrated, easier, all this kind of stuff happens. So sleep is important. We know that impacts other additional mental health. Think of how many people wrote in anxious. So the more anxiety you're feeling in a day, right, that anxiety is going to creep into other places. And anxiety is not a fun experience, right? Decreased job satisfaction, productivity, job quality. Customer service. So here's the other fun fact. So if you have a lot of porcupines coming in as customers and then you're feeling that all the time, you're going to provide even poorer service. So we don't want that to happen either. Decreased innovation. So when we talk about porcupines, the impact of dealing with porcupines is real. And so we need to make sure we acknowledge that porcupine impact. So I think it's also important. I found this online and I loved it. Respect can mean different things to different people. So some people use the term respect to mean treat me like a person. And other people use the term respect to mean treat me like an authority. And some people say, if you don't respect me, I won't respect you. And what they mean is, if you don't treat me like an authority, I won't treat you like a person. So I want to make it clear when we're talking about respect in this presentation, we're talking about treating everybody like people. That is that baseline, that everyone should be treated like a human, because we all are humans. So thinking about that. So again, that's, I think, an important piece. And so, you know, we all have to listen to Aretha, and RESPECT is important. So when we think about that incivility at work, and we talked about the impact of sleep already, what also is important is a window of tolerance. So if you were here for the self-care thing, you saw the window of tolerance. If you need a fun way to remember it, you can think of it as WTF, which is the window of tolerance framework. So that's your acronym and your mnemonic device. But the window of tolerance is basically, what is your window of capacity to deal with things, right? And so sleep impacts that. What else you have going on in your life impacts that. If you're dealing with other family stuff, if you're dealing with the year and change of COVID, if you're dealing with grief, we've had what we're going to add to our wall. If y'all want to do this, we're going to have a grief wall. There is a COVID wall in London where people are allowed to just go draw hearts of people they've lost to COVID. So we're going to put a grief wall in our office where our staff can just share hearts. They don't have to have names on them, of things that they've lost over the last year and a half, because grieving has been different. Grief takes a lot of emotional toll. And so it's going to impact that window of tolerance. So what does a window of tolerance look like? So here it is represented by Lindsay Brandman in a rainbow form, but it's basically, here's what I can take. If it goes too much, I am in extreme distress and I hyper react. And if it goes too much and I can't respond and I just shut down and I hypo react. So it's that idea that maybe if you ever have been around a lot of toddlers and it just gets to be too much and you put yourself in a timeout and you just get really, really quiet, that would be that hypo response, right? You just kind of shut down. The hyper response is when you get big and you get loud and you respond in different ways. And so you start looking for a fight with other people potentially. That window increases and decreases based on how we're feeling. So what we know, right, is that when we see those porcupines coming, we get cautious. We get ready to, we're anxious. So we're already shrinking what we're willing to take. I think it's also important to note real fast that if you have someone in your life that you deal with that is sometimes amazingly wonderful and supportive and beautiful, and other times is a porcupine, and you never know which one you're going to get because it's always an up and down, that is more exhausting than if they are always a porcupine. Why? Because you know exactly what you're going to get, right? And so you're prepared for that in different ways. If you never know where it's going to go, you're always on edge in a different way, and you don't know if the nice is really nice or if it's manipulative. So just thinking about that, it is something to take into account, that we always have that kind of going in. So we are ready for a fight. Our window of tolerance is already shrinking, and it's all because of how we're perceiving our porcupine. So I want you to tell me what you see in those first three boxes. You can type it in the chat. What do you see in that first box? What does that look like to you? Go ahead and type. You write 1, 2, 3. Volcano. See a lot of volcano explosions. All right, nice, nice. Okay, what about box number 2? Ooh, a road. A cow tail. Ooh, I like faucet, mailbox. Faucet, faucet. Very nice, very nice. Okay, box, pipe. Yeah. Champagne box. I like it, Sally. I like where you're going. How about box number 3? What do you see in box number 3? Windmill, dandelion. So we have some wishers out there. Flowers. Yep, yep. Antenna. I like it. A tree. Right. Flower. All right. Are you ready? Box number 1. You are seeing a ski jump from the perspective of a skier looking down at the jump and all their spectators. Right? Do you see it now? All right. Box number 2 is a submarine going over a waterfall. And box number 3 is a spider doing a handstand. Now, Nothing in these boxes have changed, except I've given you something else, and you can see them now, right? You see the ski jump instead of the eruption, or you can see both. So what we're thinking is our prediction is really, really powerful. So if someone starts walking towards us and they're usually a porcupine, we're ready for them to be a porcupine. We're going to see the porcupine, and we're going to engage that way with the porcupine. There is a recent article, and it is, I'm going to grab it because I have it right next to me. Your brain predicts almost everything you do. And if you want to know about the power of prediction in your brain, how many of you have ever been really, really, really thirsty and you get a drink of water and you feel refreshed? Well, this is all about the prediction of our brain, because realistically, it takes 10 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes for the water to be absorbed in our body and for us to feel quenched. But when we finally get water, we immediately feel some sort of relief. Now, if we're incredibly parched, it may take a little bit more, right? But we feel that immediate response, and that immediate response isn't really there except just to provide more saliva in our mouth. So our brain's prediction is huge. So again, that predictability is really putting in what we're going to see when we're engaging with our porcupines. So we see our porcupines, we're ready for our porcupines. So let's talk about our porcupine, right? So I want you to go back to how that porcupine made you feel. And I want you to think about a time when you acted that. Because sometimes we're the porcupines. And I have another slide where we get to that. And we're going to talk about that a bit more. But usually our porcupines, we have no idea what's coming behind them. So the example I'm going to use is the Karen idea, right? So we talk about Karens all the time right now. They're in the news all the time. But let's talk about Karen. We have no idea what happened to Karen before. We also know that historically, through movies, through story tales and fairy tales, through systems and structures, we have been told time and time again, if women are under attack, we have to call for help. We have to call for a big, strong person to come and save us. So if someone is feeling under attack, it makes sense that their response to that response to that fear would be to call in for help. Right? Now, the reason they may be feeling under attack is something that we're trying to unpack with implicit bias training and things like that. And that is not what this training is today. So I need to acknowledge it's a whole nother training, but we have to replace judgment with wonder, right? It's the idea of, well, we'll wonder why. So again, why people do what they do, there's always reasons behind it. You just have to have the empathy to ask. And that's where we come to this. This is based on, the wholehearted school counseling is based for school kids, but adults are just giant children. We like to think that we hit a certain age and we can completely manage all of our emotions and we're rock stars at all this. We all get wrapped up in the same stuff. I have snapped at people. So my story about being my own porcupine is there was some day, I can't even remember what day it was and what had happened that day, but we were on our way to Sam's Club. And do you know those lovely human beings who try to sell you cell phones and artificial grass and solar panels at Sam's Club when you walk in, or Costco? And he walked up to me and he was about to say, "Ma'am, are you interested?" And all I could say was, "Not today." And I kept walking. Step up. I'm gonna be looking for a book for you. And so when my family started laughing at me, because I'm usually very nice, I'm the person that, you know, when you go to Vegas and there's the folks handing out the flyers on the street, I'm the one who says no thank you. So for me to just yell and scream at someone, "Not today." And so my husband was like, "I'm really sorry. She's just had a really bad day," and everything else. So I was a porcupine in that moment. My porcupine was based on nothing that gentleman did. It was all based on where I was in that day. So it's important to know whether we're the porcupine or someone else is the porcupine, that the reason they're a porcupine, we don't know. I also love this proverb, and it's, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." I think what it talks a lot about, so we're child welfare Christian services, so we deal a lot with kids who've survived a whole lot of trauma. If you tell a kid or an individual over and over and over again that they're not good enough, that they're not worthy, that they're not valuable, I don't know how we can expect them to be anything except frustrated, angry, right? Like, think about how we deal with porcupines: anxious, ready to do battle, or ready to referee, right? We're constantly on edge. So again, where are we in that setting? How are we engaging with that? So it makes sense. If you haven't heard it before, it's the idea that hurt people hurt people. And so if you don't heal the wounds, you'll bleed on people who never hurt you. It's that same idea that if you go around and you're building walls to protect yourself, you're going to be angry before people have a chance to hurt you again. So it's really paying attention to that I hope hopefully flips more towards empathy. And acknowledging, so if we talk about those Karen situations, right, if we have someone who's questioning someone and they've been questioned a million times because of systems and structures, they're not going to be, oh, let me explain gently and comfortably how this is happening to me. They're going to probably be a little more anxious and frustrated too. So there's a lot that we have to acknowledge when we talk about porcupines and what happens. So I told you sometimes I am a porcupine. This is a photo of my son's bulletin board. And so it lives there, which I guess tells you how he loves it. But it says, I love you even when I'm a butt. Because sometimes we're porcupines to the people we love the most, because we know that their window of tolerance for us is bigger. So it's important to know that sometimes when people, I remember reading a toddler development book, and they said that, you know, you'll go pick up your kid from daycare and then they'll throw a major fit. And the daycare provider will be like, they were so awesome all day. I don't know what happened. And I remember reading that it's because they feel safest with you to have this reaction. So whenever my child threw a fit, then I would say, this is developmentally healthy. It means he's attached. And that was my way to cope with the fit. There's some piece of that that's true, but it also means that you're in a really, really great place to push back on some of that behavior with the people you can be porcupine and safe with. The important thing to know, so fun facts about porcupines. Porcupines often stick themselves. Now, this is true for porcupines, real porcupines, and our metaphorical porcupines people. And the reason they stick themselves for real porcupines is they like to go into trees where they eat bark and nuts and leaves, and they go out too far and they fall. And so they impale themselves with their own quills. That is why porcupine quills are covered with antibiotics. Fun fact. Now, here's the other fun fact. When we are porcupining, we often stick ourselves too. And our supportive humans in our life, those other people who care for us, they serve as our antibiotic because they help us remove those quills and not damage ourselves because they love us, right? But at a certain point, if we're too porcupiney, it may lead to other issues. So thinking about ourselves. Now, when we think about ourselves as porcupines, I want you to think about the last time you were a porcupine and compare it to the last time you engaged with a porcupine. And think about how people responded to you. Did you see that same sort of look of, oh my goodness, right? That poor guy at Costco or Sam's Club, I mix them up all the time. I'm sure he loves having to talk to every single human who walks into that store to buy, you know, their giant bag of spinach and 3 things of milk, asking them if they, but that's his gig, right? Like, he's not there to get yelled at by people all day. So I probably really made his next interaction even more intense. Right. So again, he didn't care. Now, my husband stopped to tell him it's all because of what she's going through today. I'm really, really sorry. But I knew it was because of my circumstances. Right. And that's what we're talking about, the fundamental attribution error. So if you can remember your Psych 101 class, that's the idea that good things happen to me because I'm awesome. And good things happen to other people because they're lucky. And bad things happen to me because of bad circumstances, and bad things happen to other people because they're just awful humans, right? And so it's that we have a self-serving bias where we're going to see ourselves as well, we deserve this. They didn't deserve that. How'd they get that? So the same is true on the flip side for being a porcupine. Well, of course I'm a porcupine because I had a bad day. They're just a porcupine because they live that way and they're unhappy people. So what do we know? Right. And so it's really about unpacking that. And so as we unpack that, we hope, and this is what's funny because Robin said, we need a little self-awareness. So it's all about self-awareness, right? We have to know ourselves. And so again, replace that judgment with wonder. I wonder why. I wonder why is such a big flip from judgment. Replacing judgment with wonder, judgment with curiosity, whatever word you want to use, really changes and flips the script. For example, I'm not going to share names or stories, but my son, I'm a baseball mom. My kid plays baseball and we're near his last league season game is tonight. There is a kid on another team that every time he plays looks like he hates life. like it's the worst thing ever. And so every time he goes, he's a pitcher as well. Every time he goes on the mound, I look at my husband and I was like, this kid looks like he hates life. Why is he here? Right. So this happens several games. And then my husband comes back from practice one day, was talking to one of the other dads and said, yeah, so this kid really does hate life because he lost his mom when he was 6 or 7 years old. And so the game where we were acknowledging he was really hating life was the game on Mother's Day weekend, where they hand roses out to all the other moms. Of course, this kid hates life. There's a reason he hates life, right? So now I've switched. And so now I empathize insanely with this kiddo who's struggling through life without his mom. His dad is really supportive. So he's getting the resources he needs, but life is still hard without mom, right? And so what does that look like? And Mother's Day is even harder. So it changes how I see things. So when he gets angry and throws his glove in the dugout, I'm not ready to yell at him, right? Like part of me wants to go hug him. I want to hug the porcupine. So thinking about that. Now you can entertain various perspectives and thoughts at once. So sometimes our kids are porcupines. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And there are moments where I get the emails or the text messages, or because when I'm at work or when they come and they say, hey, Danny did this, Mikey did this. And so we engage and we break it down, and I have said to them, and you can ask them if you want to, Danny, it's not okay to hit your brother. Mikey, you deserved it. Because there are moments, and those two things can exist concurrently. There are moments where people are mean and they deserve to not be able to do that. And we still don't hit, right? So it's that, how do we engage in those multiple perspectives simultaneously? So it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to take it out on other people. So when we think about that's not okay for them to treat me that way, the empathy doesn't take this away. It's still not okay for people to yell at you and scream at you and tell you not today and ignore you as a human, right? That's not okay. But to understand why replaces how it happens, so it changes how we engage with folks. Know what your triggers and biases are. There are people in your life that will remind you of other people. And so dealing with them will automatically be harder because they remind you of a porcupine you grew up with, or a porcupine you used to be in a relationship with, or porcupines you used to work for. And so their immediate response is going to trigger you in a different way. So you have to be mindful of what your triggers are, because you just have to pay attention to those things. And so know what those biases are. And then our emotions. So you have to take care of yourself. Self-care is real. Energy management, if you prefer to call it that way. There's been a lot of resources and research and articles coming out about languishing in COVID-19, because we're not necessarily meeting mental health diagnoses, but we're also not really flourishing because it's just this kind of blah sort of a thing. Another idea is to think of it as being dormant. So how do we navigate that, right? We have to take care of ourselves. Sometimes it can be getting massages and things, but realistically, it's making sure that you have enough water, that you are eating the right foods, you're getting enough sleep, paying attention to your diet. When we talk about diet, it's not just food intake, it's the diet of what media are you taking in? What people are you engaging with? We all know a negative Nelly that every time we're around them, we feel drained when we leave. Be mindful of those experiences so you can encourage and work with people who lift you up and inspire and make you feel better, and paying attention to that. And our emotions are hugely impactful. There is research that says judges give harsher sentences right before lunch. I want you to think about that. Judges give harsher sentences right before lunch. And it's because they misinterpret their hunger as an intuition of guilt. So if we're thinking about our criminal, like, we're all people, right? We are all people. And so sometimes we can misread our emotions and what that looks like. So making sure we pay attention to that, and making sure we pay attention to our own window of tolerance. And you are okay to say, I don't have the bandwidth right now. I would love to help you, but today's not the day, right? So that is an acceptable response. Yeah, I know it's kind of a crazy thing about judges. That's why I always tell people, make sure your case is in the morning right after lunch, or bring your judge's snack. So we also have to be relational. So here's the power in this. We cannot control other people, right? We can't. It's just not a real thing. We can't control other people. We can't control ourselves. So we can have a complete impact on how we serve people in the porcupine environment, right? We can engage how close we get to the porcupine and how we go and hug the porcupine. And there's a way to hug a porcupine, because you just make sure you don't poke the quills, right? But the porcupine has to trust you first. Otherwise, they're going to push their quills up and run into you. So I think that's a key element. So how do we create the relationship? One of the things we can do in working with porcupines is ask 3 questions, at least 3 questions. I used to work at Mount St. Mary's College, and the director of student affairs, Jane Lingua, said the issue is always at least 3 questions down. So if someone comes to complain to you about X is usually not what's really the problem. So the example I love to use is dishes in the sink. I hate dishes in the sink. It drives me crazy. So when I go home and there's dishes in the sink and I get frustrated, realistically, it has nothing to do with dishes in the sink. It's because why are the dishes in the sink? Why didn't someone else wash the dishes in the sink? In order for me to be able to use the sink, I have to empty the dishwasher, put the dishes that are in the sink into the dishwasher, and then I can use the sink. Why is my time not as valuable as other people's? That's it. It's about, why do I feel disrespected? It is not about the fact that there are actually dishes in a sink, right? So you have to get down to those multiple questions. So 3 questions down. Then we have to really, really listen to the answers. So a lot of times we'll engage in a conversation with someone who has a different opinion, and we're listening for when we can pull out the wrongs. We can correct, we can get those things, and we can push them back with different facts or things like that. We have to really listen to what's being said and why people are saying what's going on. We have to listen with empathy, right? And realize that not all conflict is bad. So the difference between high conflict and good conflict is high conflict feels repetitive. It's just going around in circles. You have conversations with people. There's no solution. There's no outcome. You don't feel better. Sometimes you feel worse. And it's just around and around and around you go. Good conflict is where you actually engage in that curious listening. And it's, okay, what can we do? What can we learn? How can we connect, right? So I think it's important to note that conflict in and of itself is not an awful thing, but we want to make sure that it's conflict with a purpose, that there's that curiosity. And again, remember, just because you have empathy doesn't mean you're agreeing with the behavior, right? You can still listen with an empathetic ear and still say, okay, and that behavior, that action is still not okay, right? So that's okay. The other thing it's important to realize when working with porcupines or any relationship is it's a process. It's not an immediate thing. You can't deal with a porcupine for 5 years, have one good interaction and think, we're gold. Just like you can't have one salad and feel like, why didn't I lose 20 pounds, right? It has to be a constant ongoing process of change and development and building trust and being authentic and being present and having empathy, because we know that life is kind of crazy, and things that happen to us today could take us back 10 days, and we could do really, really great in a relationship and then have an awful experience and lose some of that progress in different ways, right? Trust is hard to build. So being mindful of that, and people who have been, who have survived untrustworthy or violations of trust and have survived trauma, it takes a little bit longer for them to trust you, right? Like if you've ever had an abused animal that you take in as your own, it takes them longer to warm up because they don't know if they should trust you right away. And realistically, that's a survival skill, so it makes sense. So being mindful that it's that process. And so we have to kind of role model that vulnerability, that discomfort, that authenticity first, if you're comfortable doing it, right? I'm going to give you some options in a minute. So if you're thinking, yeah, this sounds all great and dandy, but I'm not opening myself up to get hurt from these people because I'm not going to go hug a porcupine because I don't want to get stuck. And so that's a real option too. So you have to be real and relational in your comfort zone and what feels safe, right? So don't just, run out and hug all kinds of porcupines that are ready to stick you and then get jabbed in the heart either. So it's a balance of how things process. So there's this great book that I finished for my book club friends. It's called Collaborating with the Enemy, if you want to read it. And it's the idea that it presents different options anytime we engage with people. So if we're dealing with people who have differences of opinion, one thing we can do is adapt, right? That reframe. I wonder why. So I look at this other kid and I see him in a different way. So if he was on my team, I probably would engage differently, right? He's not on my son's team, so I don't really engage all that much. But I wouldn't be angry. It would be more sympathetic. So I would adapt how I engage. You can force. I'm a firm believer that we can't really force people to do anything. You always have a choice. It's how I raise my children. So I said, I can't force you to clean your room, but I can make life a little uncomfortable if you don't. So you won't get, as much free time and tech time and sports time and things like that. So again, it's not necessarily force in my opinion, but it's the term that's used by the author. So for citation's sake, that's what we're going to go with. You can leave. It is a real option to leave or ask other people to leave. You always have an option to say, this is not okay, and this is what the rules are, and I'm out. And so I have a phrase from a great friend of mine who I call my work wife, although she moved to Texas and I still love her. But she used to say in HR, you know, these are the expectations, and it sounds like you have some big decisions to make, right? So it's one of those ideas that you have to decide what's okay, what's not okay. And these are the rules to continue to engage in this relationship if it's a professional one. And these are the decisions you have to make. You're not telling someone that they're fired. You're not telling them you're letting them go. You're telling them they have to make some decisions, because it is up to them what they want to do. Again, because you can't force people to do things. You can just encourage them and support them in that growth. But if you're in a personal relationship, you can make that exit. If you're the staff or the boss and you decide this environment is not an environment I want to be in anymore, you can leave, which is why one of the costs of civility is turnover, right? And so if we talk about turnover while you're searching for a job, I don't know about you, but when I've ever gotten in that job search place, job searching is exhausting. So of course your job productivity and your innovation and your job quality is going to start to drop. So that all makes sense, right? So you have these three options, or you can collaborate. And the reason that collaborate has two different options is oftentimes when we think about collaboration, we're thinking about agreeing. So we have to work with the porcupine, we have to agree on the problem. Here's the problem that we're talking about. It's how you treat me, how you engage, or how whatever. We have to agree on a solution, and we have to agree on a plan that is often directed, right? So stretch collaboration. And the book is by Adam Kahane, Kahane, if you want it, talks about you don't have to agree on the problem. You don't even have to agree on what it really is, which may be better when you're working with Porcupine. You can have multiple solutions going forward and try all of them at once. So if you have the idea of fail fast, fail often, you can kind of go and see what works. And if it works, continue working with it. And if it doesn't, throw it out. And then last but not least, it's not a directed solution. It's one that's co-created. And so I'm a culturally responsive methodology individual. So I'm really big on the with, not for, or on, right? So that idea, we've all heard, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. But the other thought is, if you're not part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. If you are, so when Sally said she had to referee people, right? Realistically, those two porcupines need to figure it out. And so she can have a role in there, but if she's in it, she's in the mix with everybody. She can't just tell them what to do, right? I can't just tell my porcupine what I want. I have to change how I engage in that relationship. So this is great and awful all at the same time, because what it does is it means that our engagement with our porcupine is not about us, right? It's everything that they come in, but what we can do when engaging with our porcupine is all about us. So what does that look like? Part of it looks like boundaries. And so another element that came from this Collaborating with the Enemy book is very much that a lot of people look at love and power as two different sides of a dichotomy or a binary. And really it's that blend that's important when working with people. If you love everybody and you never have any sort of power, right, you can get stepped on a little bit. But if you're always asserting your power, where's the mercy, where's the justice, where's the love, sort of a thing. So it's the blend of those two that makes that perfect empathetic leadership interaction. And what does that look like? That looks like boundaries. It means this is okay, this is not okay. And what does that look like? I also love the quote at the bottom, which is, accountability feels like an attack when you're not ready to acknowledge how your behavior harms others. So sometimes it's about finding the right time and space. So when we want to engage with our porcupines to talk about what's happening, we don't want to do it when their quills are all up, right? We want to do it when we have that safe space. The reason we can take feedback from our loved ones that, whoa, why are you so fussy? Is because we feel safe there. We don't have to have our quills up. So our quills go up, but it's not all the way up ready to attack, right? And so it's finding that safe space. I was in a meeting yesterday really quickly, and one of our staff members was kind of persnickety. And so it was, with three of us that have a pretty good relationship. And we're like, what's going on with you, right? And we just called it out. And they shared that they had suffered some really big losses in the last 2 weeks. Their window of tolerance was smaller. right? It's just their attention is elsewhere. So dealing with things at work is not as important when you lose someone, particularly when you lose a young person. So they lost a grandchild. And so that's hard. That's hard to deal with. And so we all talked about it, and we had a moment of sharing emotions. And it wasn't, that's not why we had the meeting. That's not why we were there, but it was a space that needed it, right? And so they felt a little better. We all shared a little bit of our collective grief, which will all be going on our grief wall, hopefully later this month. So again, it's that sometimes you have to wait till people are ready to hear it, and we have to play with the adapt before we can do that collaboration. But making sure you set those boundaries so that it's okay. So in the meantime, before you get to set boundaries, there's a couple of guidance, couple of guidelines I like to go by. The garbage truck at the bottom represents the garbage truck rule, which came from an article with a taxi driver who everyone was road raging around him, and he just waved and smiled. And his passenger was like, "Aren't you going to yell back?" And he's like, "Look, a lot of people are like garbage trucks. They are full, again, of anger, frustration, despair, and they're trying to look for a place to dump it. I don't want it to be me, so I just brush it off, and my life is a lot better," right? So don't take on burdens that aren't yours to take whenever possible. The rule of 5 I have used with my children on numerous occasions. If it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't worry about it for more than 5 minutes. So a lot of times, and they're young, right? So everything is disastrous in some ways, but we had a conversation that it felt like pitching wasn't equal. And I said, "Well, is it really?" And then so we evaluated some things. And then I said, "Well, in the bottom line, is this going to matter in 5 years, right? Does anyone really care about Shohan Otani's pitch count from when he was 12? No? Then why are we worrying about this, right? Continue to do your good work. Continue to do the best you can every time you're on the field. Continue to cheer on your team. That's why we play baseball, not because we're on our way to the major leagues. If that happens, hot diggity, but that's not the plan, right? So having those conversations. And when all else fails, do the mindfulness technique of stop. So just stop, take a breath. There's a pressure point right here that if you can call it a magic mustache. I learned this from my new boss. The magic mustache, if you're a kiddo, or you can just tell people it's a pressure point, that if you push right there, it can help calm you. So you may want to do this with your office door closed. I don't know. If not, you can do whatever makes you happy, but it can help bring you down. Just take a breath. Square breathing is a really good way. So it counts of 4 for inhale, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4, and then just the 4 breathing helps calm you down. Observe what you're feeling. There is power in naming it. So you don't have to solve things, just name them. This is what I'm feeling. And then allow it to happen, right? You are not your emotions. You can be angry, frustrated. I had a moment the other day where I was so mad, but I'm not a mad person, right? You're allowed to experience the full range of emotions. In fact, they say mindfulness and health and well-being is actually related to emodiversity, not just always feeling happy, right? So it's that whole range of emotions. You're allowed to feel it, but don't become it. And then have that and just kind of relax and take time to move from that. So we have about 15 minutes left. So I love this cute little porcupine. I did have one more hedgehog in there. So if you saw him, I acknowledge I had 2 slides with the hedgehog. I love this little porcupine. He's a little baby porcupine. So what do we need to deal with porcupines? We need empathy and compassion for them and for us to realize it's okay. They're coming from someplace and we don't know their story. Emotional intelligence to know our own triggers, to know the power of us in the relationship, but also acknowledge that it's not just us in the relationship. So the Bhagavad Gita says the work is your own, but not the fruits thereof, right? So that idea that our relationship and how we engage in it is incredibly powerful and important, but it's not the only thing happening. So that's self-emotional intelligence and relational intelligence. Know how to read people, when to have those conversations, when not. There's a great Brene Brown short about empathy if you haven't seen it. It's about sitting with people sometimes in the discomfort. Curiosity, wonder, really, really listen to people's answers. Q-tip is something we use here at Crittenton. It's a code word if you need to use it for people. It stands for quit taking it personally. So on the floor, when staff see other staff starting to get a little too invested in a personal way, in a moment, right? Like we don't have, professional boundaries are real here. We don't have that sort of thing. But if someone's starting to get triggered because of something one of our kiddos said, it's, hey, can you give me a Q-tip for medical? We don't provide Q-tips. So it's one of those things that it's supposed to be a trigger to kind of snap people out of it. And it is completely okay, healthy, and encouraged to set boundaries. So hopefully with that, I didn't see any other questions. So I'm gonna, these are the resources. There's some great books and some articles. So I want to leave this up there for a little bit. And you are welcome to grab some of those. Think Again, as an additional plug, was not the most recent, but the penultimate book that we read as a book club. So if you're intrigued on what kinds of book, that would be a good example of one. And do I have any questions?
Jamie, Dr. J, this was amazing. I'm sure there are
Q-tip stands for quit. Oh, sorry. Q-tip stands for quit taking it personally. I'm sorry, Robin.
No, I have so many notes. That was one of the questions. I loved replacing judgment with wonder. So when you're frustrated and you're in a situation and you feel those quills coming at you, obviously, as you said, being an empathetic leader, you take that time to process and what is this person dealing with? And I wonder why they are coming at me this way. So that's the best. However, how do you get past that? Then how, what's the next step so that you don't engage and escalate?
Sometimes it's a moment of giving time, right? Like I think there are organizations where you ask if it's okay to give feedback, right? Are you in a place where you can take feedback? So part of it is, I really appreciate this moment. I think I need some time. Can we reconvene in however long? Or the good old fashioned, I think I need a break, or I'm going to say something I can't take back, right? Like there are those elements where it's, you just have to breathe. My mom used to do this thing where she would count. She would just go, 1, 2, right? And I knew that's when I was in trouble, because she was getting there and I had till about 10 to get out of the room or reframe it for her, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of taking a breath. And obvious, it's kind of like public speaking. The more you do it, the better you get, right? And so the more you can feel a feeling, catch yourself, pull it back, the better you are. We all have biases in a million different ways. And the reason I'm using bias as an example is because we all do it. If we were to think of our team right now, there is probably 1 or 2 people that you would snap to ask for something before everybody else, because you trust them, right? You know they'll get it done. You know they'll do a great job. You're not going to have to coach them 5,000 ways to Sunday, and they're going to, that's a bias, right? So it doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's awful. It doesn't mean you're a horrible human. It just means that we have a bias. And so when one of those people comes to us, it's going to be different than when someone else who needs more coaching. There are people that I see their email address and I start to prickle before I even open the email. And I have to say, okay, Jamie, slow your roll. You don't even know what this is about. So yeah, it's an email, so it's easier to take the breath. But it's, first of all, I think it's being aware. It's being really honest with who are the porcupines in our lives, so we know we have to provide more care when we're in those situations. If we don't even want to, and you don't have to tell them they're a porcupine, right? You don't have to say, oh, you're coming, give me 5 minutes. Like that's, you don't have to acknowledge to those people that they're your porcupine. But if you can engage differently, it can help. Does that make sense, Robin?
Yes, it does. It does. I like that about, having an opportunity to provide feedback. As Jamie just mentioned with Think Again, one of my biggest takeaways with that was, what kind of data can I provide you that might persuade you to change your mind? And if the person looks at you and says, there isn't any amount of data that you could provide that is going to help me change my mind, then it's just a conversation. It's over. It's done. There's no point.
Yep. Oh, thank you. Yeah, behavior theory, practical self-improvement, philosophy, spirituality, and plain common sense. Yeah, there's some of these things. I had a researcher once say it comes from the Journal of Duh. And it's that idea that we all know this, it's just harder to do. So you're welcome. Any other questions? My email's there. You're welcome to shoot me an email anytime. 2 pages of notes, and I will provide this PowerPoint. So I'm all about passing things on. So if you want to get the resources later, you can, and you can grab those sorts of things.
Great. If you could send that to Robin, and then Robin can share that with the group.
Can I say something? I don't have everybody's email. So if you want the PowerPoint, please email me at robins@fieldstoneleadership.org. I will type that in here. But if you want the PowerPoint, please let me know. Okay.
I didn't cite the location for all my pictures. A lot of them were from National Geographic. I just have to be there.
No, that was great. Jamie, thank you so much. If there aren't any other questions, it's 10:53. Yeah, it was a great and timely presentation. I agree. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. This recording will be on our YouTube channel. I put that in the link in the chat. Again, I want to thank First Republic, Janet and Maren over at First Republic. Because of you, these are able to take place, and again, at no cost to the network. So it's just a unique benefit of being part of the network. So I just really want to thank you. Jamie, I feel like we could do this once a week, have a little Porcupine support group. I also have 2 pages of notes, and I've been putting things in my phone. So this couldn't have happened at a better time, both personally and professionally. So thank you to you, Jamie. Thank you to everybody at Fieldstone. We had at one point 49 people on the call, so this was a very popular call. So this was fantastic. Great suggestion by our network. Again, if you have other specific topics you would like addressed, please email me directly, and I will do my best to find another fabulous presenter to share their expertise with all of you. So everybody be well, stay healthy. And stay in touch. And again, if you ask, we listen and we will provide for you. So thank you to all of you, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks all.
Bye.
I'd say just in case anyone had other questions.
I want to, Robin, stop recording.